Hey there guys, I am the Six Machine and welcome back to another Warhammer video. So we know that Warzone Charadon Part 2 is on the way, with the Sisters of Battle, the Death Guard and the Admech all playing a key role in the storyline, but coming alongside all of that, ready to bring death and destruction to all the loyal defenders of the system, is none other than the Dark Master himself, Lakor. And now, whilst the GW showed off a few of his funky new rules, abilities and weapon profiles in previous articles, they have now decided to show off even more of his rule set. So let's dive right in and see what else Lakor can do, aside from, pretty much one-shot Guilliman. I won't go through the stuff that we've seen before, but they did show us his sword once again, and so we can see his truly terrifying melee potential, with 6 attacks, each doing D3 plus 3 damage, and ignoring invuns. It really is easy to see just how easily he will be able to cleave through pretty much any enemy that he faces off against. The first of the new bits of information they show off are related to his own unique psychic discipline, the Noctic discipline, and as we guessed, this is unique to the Disciples of Lakor. They show off 2 of the damage dealing spells in the form of Void Slivers, which lets you draw a line from the Psyker to an enemy model, and that unit and any others under the line suffer a mortal wound or D3 mortal wounds if that unit has 11 or more models. It's quite a nice little ability for a warp charge of only 5 and can lead you to getting a good amount of wounds through on bigger or more tightly bunched up units, and with Lakor being able to fly, he should be able to get into a great position to line up a lot of enemy squads to catch with it. So overall, for only a warp charge of 5, I do think this is potentially, depending on your opponent, a better option to go for in terms of what to cast than Smite. Betraying Shades is another spell that they show, and this one is honestly hilariously destructive in the right situation. It allows you for a warp charge of 6 to select up to 6 models in a unit and then add their combined unmodified attacks characteristic together, and then you roll that many dice, and for each roll of a 6+, which you can add 1 to if you rolled an 11 or more for the psychic test, they suffer a mortal wound. Now sure, against things like guardsmen this is pretty crap, but imagine targeting a unit of witches or incubi or blade guard veterans. You could be rolling a really huge number of dice, and yes, it only wounds them on 6s, but still you could legitimately wipe out half of a unit of witches or incubi and completely wipe out their presence on the board. It may not be the best power going, but it has a huge amount of spike potential, I think, and it is incredibly cool and fluffy as well. I just love the image of the targeted unit's shadows coming alive and striking them down before they can even react. It's very chaosy, and it's very much in line with the kind of attacks that I can imagine Lakor doing. So it is another big win in my books. Like his sword, we've also seen his Immortal Vigor and Shadow Form abilities before, but suffice to say, they still do an absolutely fantastic job of keeping Lakor alive on the battlefield, and with his Toughness 7 and 16 wounds, which they state in the article, he is going to be an absolute nightmare for your enemy to put down, requiring things like missile launchers or las cannons or melter to even start to be able to wound him on 4s. But in addition to that, he also has access to some brand new stratagems to help keep him alive even longer. And one of the most potent that they show off is the incredibly sneaky Blessings of Lakor. For 2 command points, this lets you, when you fail a saving throw, to change the damage of that attack that went through to 0. So yes, against a load of bolters it's pretty much going to be wasted, but if Lakor gets shot at by, say, a Volcano Lance from a Castellan, or even just a multi-melter within half range, you can turn that potentially 8 or 9 damage to just 0. Which is the ultimate in trolling really, exactly in line with what you should expect from Lakor, and I really love it. 2 command points isn't exactly cheap, but if you've just weathered an entire turn of fire and that last final las cannon or dark lance shot manages to get a wound through, you can use this and basically just tell your opponent, not today thank you, I want Lakor for another turn. And I really love that it's reactive and not like preemptive. The fact that you don't have to declare this at the start of your turn and then you just ignore the first damage that comes through, so your enemy could just target some bolters at you to get rid of it. The fact that you can wait until your enemy brings out their big guns and ignore the big nasty d6 damage kind of rolls is very, very useful for this. It adds a lot of trickery to the character and means that even if your opponent is trying to save something big for the end of their shooting phase just to take down Bellicor if nothing else does, they know that you can potentially just deny that last big shot of theirs and just completely negate it, so it may mess with their plans throughout the entire shooting phase. It is a pricey, but it is a very powerful stratagem and can very easily save Bellicor or another Disciples of Bellicor unit, because you don't have to use it on Bellicor pretty much every single phase if you need it to. Finally, for Bellicor, they show off a few of the unit buffing and aura abilities that he comes along with, and first off is his Warlord trait, Shadow Lord. So if he is your Warlord, he essentially gains a Chapter Master style buff ability, letting you choose a friendly Disciples of Bellicor unit, but not vehicle, interestingly enough, and give it full rerolls when it rolls to hit. This, as we've mentioned many times before, is a hugely powerful buff and can turn a squad of Havocs or a big horde of Bloodletters into an absolutely terrifying prospect for your enemy to face. And in addition to this, he also has the more generic reroll ones style captain ability. In this case, his is called the Dark Master. And again, it's interesting in that it doesn't affect vehicles, which is how a lot of the older 8th edition codexes used to be worded, but they slowly moved away from that to be more inclusive of pretty much everything in the army with later codexes. So honestly, this does have me a little bit worried. I hope they don't go back to that way of only things like infantry and bikers and that kind of thing being the recipients of those special army-wide rules, because honestly, I do love the idea of tanks and vehicles getting them as well. But in any case, it is a nice 6-inch aura of reroll hit rolls of 1, which, as always, is a very welcome buff and really does help you to keep your units hitting accurately and doing as much damage as possible to the enemy. So Bellicor isn't just a terrifying beatstick or unkillable distraction carnifex, although he is arguably both those things. He can definitely bring some great force multiplying abilities to your army as well. His final buff style ability that they show off is actually another one of the psychic powers he can choose from the Noctic discipline, and this one is another very powerful one actually. Wreathed in Shades has a warp charge of 7, and if cast, you choose a friendly Disciples of Bellicor unit within 12 inches, and that unit cannot be targeted by enemy ranged weapons unless they're the closest target, or the enemy firing unit is within 12 inches. It specifically doesn't work on monsters or vehicles, so no, Bellicor can't cast this on himself because, let's be honest, that would be disgusting, but being able to protect key units like Havocs or other melee units by casting this on them and then making sure there is some cheaper chaff units in front of them to take the brunt of the enemy fire can really help to make sure that they get to do their damage or they reach the enemy lines and just unleash all of the damage that they can do in your shooting or your combat phase. I think overall the big takeaway from these rules is that Bellicor seems to be a very, very well-rounded unit with a great mixture of pure killing potential, fantastic durability, and some very decent buffs, especially if he's your Warlord, all backed up by what is looking to be a really, really potent spellcasting discipline. And I do really hope that the rest of the powers in the Noctic discipline are just as powerful and also just as competitively priced in terms of their warp charge value, because all the ones they showed off today, for what they do, are really, honestly, very, very good for what the casting value is for them. So that's it for today. Bellicor is coming in Warzone Charadon Part 2, but what do you think of his rules? Is he going to be an absolute terror on the tabletop, or despite all of the rules and abilities he's got, do you still think he's just going to get shot off the board turn 1? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, But until next time, I will catch you later, guys.